Hi, welcome to Chez Les Fleur podcast. And we are a group of people that get together and talk about small business. We talk about women in business. We talk about couples that share a business and all the ins and outs and exciting things that happen in small business. A lot of it is retail, but we are talking to other businesses as well. If you are watching our podcast for the first time, we welcome you. If you're a returning visitor, we're so glad you came back. We talk to a lot of interesting people doing some amazing things. And today we have with us Susan from Hanoi House. She has a beautiful Vietnamese restaurant here in Peterborough. And we're so glad that you could take time. I know restaurant business is busy because, fresh product and timing and all that stuff that goes into making people happy with food. And so I appreciate that you had time to talk to us. You have a restaurant that you're going to tell us about. I'm not going to talk about it. And have you always been in the restaurant business, or
Yeah,
how
so
did you
I
how did you get here?
good question. I am originally from Peterborough and my family owned a restaurant. They started in the 90s. So we own the Golden Wheel, which is out in Cavan,
Yes.
and my parents started that in the 90s. And they're now retired, so they sold their business in 2018, and there was a short stint where I wasn't in the restaurant business for a little bit. But ultimately, it's my calling. I realize that because I keep leaving the industry and keep getting pulled back into it. So I ended up opening Hanoi House in 2020, just before COVID. So
Perfect
I only
timing.
had totally, it was all planned, of course. But that's kind of how I came to be. I have a lot of experience um, from my own family business. But then when I lived in Toronto for university, I got pulled back into the industry, bartending and working at restaurants in the city that I actually moved my way up. So even though I was in school full time, I was bartending and then taking on leadership roles, as a part time job as well. So yeah, I mean, it's like it's always really just been embedded in who I am, and I finally embraced it in 2020 when I opened up my restaurants.
Excellent. Yes. And I get the impression you haven't looked back.
Nope, I'm very happy doing what I do. It's not easy, and it requires definitely a lot of self growth and a lot of self reflection in order to get to a certain point in the business. That's for sure.
Well, and I always when I talk about my business, which is flowers, I always compare it to the restaurant business. And I always say it's a perishable product, it's a time delivery, it has to be perfect. And then I add, and I can't take the leftovers home and feed my family. So I don't think people understand in the increcy. Oh, that's I'm not, we're going to leave that word.
Intricacies.
Yes, thank you. Of the timing and everything being ready at the same time and plating it properly and getting it to the customer in a timely fashion. It really
Yeah,
is
and
a
it's
dance.
it's it's definitely like a team effort as well, right? So like if you don't have the systems in place and you don't have people that are following through on those systems, your product is gonna not be treated the way that it needs to be in order for you to prolong its life, right? So that is really interesting, actually. I never really thought of flowers that way, but yeah, you only have X amount of time with your goods as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating industry as food is as well. So other than working in food, tell me about your educational background. Have you just always studied culinary or have you studied other things?
Yeah, so I actually don't even have a culinary degree. A lot of people actually go into this industry with little to no culinary or like proper schooling for restaurants, unless you're a chef. Now, I have two degrees. They are completely unrelated to what I do. I have a Bachelor of Kinesiology from U of T, and I have a Bachelor of Education from Trent University, which, I don't regret having either of these degrees, but it is really funny what happens, sometimes when life has different plans for you. So I I love that I have different knowledge in different areas and I'm able to kind of use my life skills from those degrees into what I'm doing now. But yeah, I don't actually have any formal training in this business.
Well, and sometimes it's just, the expression, you have the touch.
Yeah,
You just have the touch with food, and you can't explain it, and you don't know where it came from, although yours is probably hereditary. And you just have that touch.
for sure. And I think a lot of us in the industry, we say we're a special breed. You have to be a special breed to do this and be willing to work the hours and put the time in and be willing to also not take a paycheck sometimes, right? Like, you eat last when you're the business owner.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Speaking of eating last, that leads me into my next question. Have you noticed a change in plant-based people wanting more vegetarian or plant-based meals? And how have you seen, if you've seen that, which I suspect you have, where and how are you seeing it?
Yeah, I see it in the numbers, first off. So when we look at our sales breakdown day or week or month, when we actually look at the numbers, evident that plant-based is important nowadays. And again, I can't really speak to back then or 10 years ago, but I can definitely tell you that people who are vegetarian and vegan make up a pretty noticeable demographic of my business. Um, and that I incorporated a lot of vegetarian and vegan items when I opened my restaurant because the idea was I wanted to make it inclusive. I wanted like the plant-based eaters to go out to eat with their friends that weren't and it not be uncomfortable because often when people go out to eat there's always that one person that's got dietary needs and they always feel like they're a pain when they ask the server like, oh, what do you have that's gluten free or dairy free or whatever it may be. And often menus are designed so that they just have like one or two items that accommodate those people. So the options there are so limited. Whereas on our menu, every section of our menu has a vegetarian slash vegan option. So you get just as many choices as everyone else. So that is what I wanted to do when I created a menu. And even now, when we come up with new items or we're doing specials, we're always thinking about the vegans and vegetarians, right? Because that's how much of our clientele they make up. So it's important to incorporate that. But, I think my biggest takeaway over the last few years is simply that you can have really good food without meat. Um, and I think we're so accustomed in the society to constantly always have like a meat on our plate. And we don't really need to eat that much protein or meat every single day, right? So it's really amazing what you can do when you just omit that and you work with what you have. And I think that's what we've done really well in our restaurant. So I'm not a plant-based eater. I do love our plant-based options in our restaurant. And in fact, a lot of my staff, none of them are actually exclusively vegetarian or vegan, but they all love, you know, our tofu banh mi's and they love eating the tofu in their soups and incorporating that actually into their diet. So it's been really neat. I think it's so important for the environment that we start changing kind of our eating habits as a whole and the way we look at how much meat we actually have to eat on a regular basis. But definitely, yeah, in the numbers, it definitely shows that it's important and important to the clientele we're serving now.
Well, and my sort of take on vegan vegetarian is, 20 years ago, if you went somewhere that you said I'd like a vegetarian option, like I've been places where I got a plate of steamed rice with steamed vegetables on it, and that like there was no spice in it, there was no sauce on it, there was no, and I remember thinking, this is the best you can do. I mean, I ate it and I mean, I was grateful for the meal, don't get me wrong, but I think as, you know, people like you get more and more confident and adventuresome and knowledgeable, then you're experimenting more with combinations of flavors and spices and herbs and you can have a really, like I say, years ago, vegetarian meant no flavor. It was the same thing. Vegetarian equals no flavor.
Yep.
And now it's like probably could very easily be the most flavorful thing on the menu and
Yep.
the most, you know, delectable.
Absolutely. And it's really cool is I actually went to a restaurant in Zurich. My husband and I went to Switzerland, I guess like 7 years ago, and we don't speak. I think the city we were in, they spoke German, so we don't speak German and can't read it. We actually wandered into a restaurant, and it was a buffet kind of build your own style restaurant. We didn't even notice, but the food, first off, looked amazing. It smelled amazing. We just built our own plates, didn't care what we were eating. But by the end of it, as we were sitting down eating, we realized that it was actually a vegetarian vegan place. We didn't notice at all. And we didn't care either. But everything we ate was so flavorful and it looked beautiful and it didn't matter. So it's kind of funny when you take away the language context and the preconceived notions of certain things because we just were like, we're hungry, we want to eat. This food looks good. Let's eat it. Tastes good. We're happy.
Smells
And then
good.
you're like, yeah, and you're like, wow, eat any,
Yeah,
and
and
that's
lots of
okay.
people in the restaurant, that says something. So
Yeah,
let's go.
yeah, and that's exactly what it was. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think I see that happening more and more. You know, the the flavors there, the trying new things, incorporating new things, and I think it's a very exciting time for food. Not being in the food industry, I think it's really exciting time for food and restaurants and
yeah, and I think the biggest challenge for if like I don't deal exclusively with plant-based food, but if you were someone that is in that industry, your biggest challenge is really getting people to try it, right? So I think your
Mhm.
biggest return on investment is just getting the food in people's mouths and just showing them how good it can be. Um, and then they'll just, automatically, you'll change their minds automatically if you just get it in their mouths.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Have you seen a difference in how your restaurant operates since the pandemic, since came out of the pandemic era?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the funny thing is for us, in the pandemic, you know what I mean? So I know what things are like pre-pandemic because I have in other restaurants and all that, right? So if I would look at industry trends, um, but because my brand and our restaurant started during COVID, we've only known that, right? So takeout, if I were to look at the industry as a whole, um, takeout has now become more popular than ever, and it's still going to continue growing, right? Just with the styles of like restaurants that are opening up now, because we're kind of starting to drift away from that old school model of restaurants. And there was a trend in, yeah, people just wanting to be able to take food home, right? So it needs to travel well. It needs to carry the flavor and the temperature well and even texture. Um, so that's definitely been a really big trend, I would say, that I've noticed. The other one, actually, and I'm not sure if this might be a surprise to you or not, but it's actually people wanting non-alcoholic beverages. So, incorporating more mocktails and non-alcoholic options, maybe because I'm getting older and I'm, having kids and stuff like that. But when you go to a restaurant, often the non-alcoholic option is pop and a Shirley Temple, right? But the more you have now, you're actually drawing a really different clientele now. So that's been actually really surprising, nice, like a nice surprise to have people receive it so well.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they're getting to be more and more flavorful and interesting and, fun to even look at before wow, this looks really nice. And then,
Yeah, you can make
it's,
a mocktail that's beautiful and
yeah.
you can use smoke and all these you can do the same things you do with cocktails and just do it with a mocktail. So I think we're just, starting to get into that now, and how much you can actually, do with it.
How old is your little sweetie now?
In the background, she's 21 months, and
Oh,
then
that's gone
I'm ex
fast.
yes, very fast, and I'm expecting another in 3 months.
Beautiful. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Well, I know that you're busy and I appreciate that you've had time to talk to us because you've got a beautiful restaurant and you're doing some fabulous things with food and I totally admire what you're doing now and I know that the stratosphere is your limit. So I I am excited for you and all the things that the future holds for you.
Thank
What we
you.
like to what we like to do at the end is we close out with 5 rapid fire questions. So if you're up for it, I've got 5 quick questions for you.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go. Apple or orange?
Apple,
Pen or pencil?
pen.
Buble or Groban?
Assuming the artist, that's what we're talking about.
Yep, it's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, but I like Josh Groban way more.
Okay, beautiful. Theater or Netflix?
Theater,
And comedy or drama?
easily comedy.
Yeah, good choice. Susan, thank you so much again for being with us. Your restaurant, Hanoi House, is really fabulous. And like I say, you're doing some great things with food and it's certainly appreciated in our community.
Thank you for
If you're
having me.
watching, well, glad to have you and anytime. If you're watching for the first time, welcome. If you're a returning guest, we are glad to have you. This is Susan Tung from Hanoi House in Peterborough. And stay tuned next week. We're going to talk to Maria Hersey. She's an author living on the East Coast and she does children's books and is doing some really fun things for kids. So, Susan, again, happy to have you. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.